So what if a company could own a patent on a part of your DNA? I know, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but this was a very real question at the heart of a huge legal battle that went all the way to Australia's highest court. Today, we're going to unpack the incredible case of the unpatentable gene.
I mean, just think about that for a second. Could a corporation literally hold the exclusive rights to a gene that exists inside your own body? A gene that might determine your risk for some really serious diseases. This wasn't some philosophical debate. This was the real deal question in a landmark case.
It's a pretty wild question, right? And in Australia, the highest court in the land came back with an answer that was just as stunning and just as clear. A big, loud, definitive no.
Okay, so how on earth did we get to that answer? Well, it all came down to this landmark case from 2015, Darcy versus Myriad Genetics Incorporated. And let me tell you, this ruling completely changed the game for patent law and medical research in Australia forever.
Right at the center of this whole thing was the BRCA1 gene. You've probably heard of it. A mutation here is famously linked to a much higher risk of breast and ovarian cancer. So you see, this was never just some abstract legal argument. It was really about who gets to control access to potentially life-saving information.
So how did the court even begin to tackle this? Well, it all boiled down to one really fundamental distinction: the difference between a discovery and an invention.
And folks, this was the million-dollar question. When a company finds a gene that's already inside the human body and then isolates it in a lab, is that an invention because of all the scientific work they put in? Or is it simply a discovery of something that nature already created? Let's just quickly break that down. A discovery, that's just finding something that's already out there, like finding a new species of fish. An invention, though, that's about creating something totally new, something the law calls artificially created. And here's why that matters so much. Under the law, you can only get a patent for an invention. You can't just patent a discovery. So for Myriad Genetics to hold on to their patent for the BRCA1 gene, they had to prove that what they did was an act of invention. This one little distinction, it was everything.
So where did the court finally land on this? Well, their final word was decisive. And you know what's really remarkable? It was unanimous. Every single judge on the high court was in agreement.
The court's reasoning was just perfectly laid out in the judgment itself. It said that isolating the gene was, and I'm quoting here, a discovery of something that exists in nature, rather than a making of something artificially created. Wow, you really can't get much clearer than that. So, in other words, they were saying that just taking the gene out of the human body and looking at it in a lab didn't fundamentally change what it was. It wasn't some new creation, it was the exact same naturally occurring genetic information, just in a different location. Now, the specific legal test for this in Australia is called the manner of manufacture. It's basically just the legal yardstick to decide if something is a true invention. And the court found that because isolating a gene was a discovery, not an invention, it failed the test. Simple as that. The court's logic here is actually super simple and powerful. Let's just walk through it. 1. The BRCA1 gene is a product of nature. 2. Taking it out of the body doesn't change its core information. 3. That means it is not an artificial creation. So, the final conclusion? It's not a patentable invention. Boom.
Okay, so a patent was overturned. Big deal, right? But why does this ruling really matter outside of a courtroom? Well, the real-world impact of the Myra decision is, frankly, huge.
First things first, you have to understand this was a complete reversal. This ruling directly threw out years and years of previously allowed gene patents. It drew a brand new line in the sand for what could and what absolutely could not be patented in Australia.
So what does this mean for us? For science? For medicine? Well, it means our shared genetic information is protected. It stays in the public domain where it belongs. It means more scientific research and innovation because now scientists can study these genes without worrying about getting sued. And most importantly, it means more people can get access to genetic testing for diseases. It sets a really clear boundary for the future.
So if you take just one thing away from all of this, let it be this. At the end of the day, the High Court of Australia declared, in essence, that the fundamental building blocks of what makes us human cannot be owned, they cannot be patented, and they cannot be locked away for profit.
It's a powerful conclusion, for sure, but it also opens up a whole new can of worms, doesn't it? This case settled the issue for naturally occurring genes that we isolate. But what happens next? What happens when we stop just discovering genes and start actively writing new ones from scratch? Well, that next legal battle, it's already here.